Welcome back to my channel, and for today we're going to be looking at another pair of Caswell boots and another Lisbon 2 boot, but this one is an olive waxed flesh. Now, just looking at this, you might be thinking, what's the difference between this and the other one that I already reviewed? Well, it does contain the same last, it's the same size, but there are some differences that I want to point out. And I'll give you some of the reasons why I really like this model of the boot. So let's begin. So to begin with, this is another Lisbon 2 boot on the same lane last as the previous video in which I covered. But let's begin with the leather itself, which is this olive waxed flesh. Now, waxed flesh has been around for a while, and you can find lots of boot makers that are using it, but it's not that often that I see the olive waxed flesh available in a boot. This leather also comes from the Horween Tannery in Chicago, and it does have a similar sort of feel to Chrome Excel in terms of like the thickness. The oils also move around very easy if you push on the leather, but the surface is very different in that it's a little more rough and just has a sort of drier feeling to it. Just like Chrome Excel, one of the nice things about this leather is that you won't have to polish it. All you have to do is just make sure it's conditioned from time to time. And in comparison to the olive Chrome Excel, which I have in the other boot, this leather definitely has more green to it. It's much more obvious. And just like the olive Chrome Excel version of this boot, this beige stitching adds a really nice contrast, and it also matches the welt stitching perfectly. I don't know why, but I'm just a big fan of a lot of boots that have contrast beige stitching, regardless of if it's a green or tan or blue boot. I just like it. But the other thing about this leather is that it's quite soft. In fact, I say it's pretty soft. It's more soft than the Chrome Excel boot that I have, and it just has a little bit more of a looser feel to it. So because this leather has a more softer and a little bit looser kind of feel, so as you might expect, it's very easy to break in. There's really not much difficulty at all with the break-in. It's not a stiff leather in any way. If anything, some people might not like it because it has a little bit more of a loose feel. It just depends on what you're looking for in a boot. And the boots are lined just like my other pair, so it's not an unlined boot. The tongue is gusseted in case anyone is wondering. What's interesting though is that when I looked at the inside where the heel sock liner is, it's a different logo than my other pair. So this must have been the very early Caswell logo, as Kevin was still figuring out what logo he wanted to use on the brand. So it's kind of neat to own something that was in the early stages of this company before it changed. But also, this sock liner has a completely different feel in that it's more like Grantstone or Alden. It has that kind of leather, whereas my other pair, it's more like Cheney, if that makes any sense. Both the olive waxed flesh and the olive Chrome Excel, they have the exact same insole in the fore part of the boot, so that's going to be the same, which I find very comfortable. I didn't find it too firm. Now, it's not as comfortable as the Higgins Mill from Allen Edmonds in the forefoot, but it's pretty much on par with like Alden or Cheney or most other brands that have this same thing going on. Now, is there anything I would change about this boot? Just one little thing that I can think of. I wish Caswell would use piping around the lacing gap area. What you'll notice in this boot is that there is piping around the throat area of the boot, but once it gets to the lacing area, there's no piping. There's just a raw edge, or what's sometimes called profila binding. I do think the boots would look a little bit nicer if it had piping all the way down through the lacing area. This is really a minor thing, and a lot of boot companies also have this same design that Caswell is using. But just me personally, I like how brands like Allen Edmonds and Alden will have the piping go all the way down for a lot of their boots. But this is just a subjective taste thing on my own. Now, in terms of sizing for this boot, I went true to size just like I did with the other one, but this version of the boot in olive wax flesh, it fit definitely a little bit more roomy than the other pair that I had. And the roominess is a little bit noticeable to the point that I don't usually wear really thin socks with this olive wax flesh pair because it just seems to fit me better if I wear socks that are just a little more thick. But this brings up a very interesting point, and that is about, sizing variation within the same size. Now, one of the things that's so difficult is that there's something that is called sizing variation within the same size. So if I say that the Lisbon 2 boot and olive waxed flesh, if I say that it fits larger and roomier than another Lisbon boot, that may or may not be true for you, simply because whoever created your boots may have constructed them differently on that day. And this can be kind of frustrating because it's hard to tell what is the correct way something is supposed to fit. Is the version of the olive waxed flesh Lisbon 2, is that the way it's supposed to fit? Is it supposed to fit more on the roomy side? Or is it supposed to fit a little bit more snug like my other pair in olive chrome Excel? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And just to give you another example, I recently picked up this pair of chilly Higgins Mill boots from Allen Edmonds. These fit fantastic. They fit a little bit roomier than my pair in brown chrome Excel. There's a little more instep room, which I like. And they're just really comfortable. And the quality control was good on this pair. But the point is, I don't know if the Higgins Mill is supposed to fit more like this, or if it's supposed to fit like my brown chrome Excel version. I just don't know. I've had this experience with just about every brand. I've had it with Allen Edmonds, I've had it with Caswell, I've had it with Alden. And the thing is, there's a range of what a size can be. So if you buy a pair of boots and they tend to fit a little too snug or a little too large, I recommend ordering another one just to make sure, because you might be surprised. So the point here is that take everything I say about sizing with a grain of salt, because it may not be entirely accurate for your experience. Now, one other thing I want to mention is the sole. And this was the first time I tried the Dr. Soul's outsoles. And I have to say, I think this is probably the best rubber sole that I've tried so far on any boot. It just has a very nice combination of not being too heavy, yet it's really firm, but it also is pretty forgiving on your feet. It combines all those things of being forgiving, not too hard, and also not too heavy. Now, would I say it's a huge improvement from the Day-Night or the Ridgeway Day-Night sole? No, not a huge difference. You'll be fine if you choose Day-Night or the Ridgeway over this. I'm just saying I noticed this sole does feel a little bit more pleasant to my feet, but it's also usually a little more expensive to get. And another difference with this one is that it has a nice leather heel stack in it, which my other version of this boot did not have the leather heel stack. It was all just completely rubber. So I like how this looks better. It just has, it just looks more complete this way. Now, I realize by the time this video is released, there probably will not be many pairs left of the olive waxed flesh. However, you never know, they might have another run of these in the future, especially if there's a lot of demand for it. One other thing to mention is that I didn't really love the laces on this boot. They were the pretty standard brown laces that most brands are using these days, like Grantstone or, other boot brands. There's nothing wrong with the brown laces that came with the boot. I just prefer these semi-waxed olive green laces from Guarded Goods. And I think this color of laces also brings out the color of the boots a little more. And just like my other pair, these are made in Spain. But the bottom line is that this is a really high quality boot. I think the thing about the Lisbon is that it's going to depend on if the last works for your foot or not. And I have read that quite a few people have had difficulty with this last for one reason or another. It is a little bit narrow, but not narrow. It's kind of hard to explain. It's a very efficient kind of last. There's not a lot of extra room in it. So if the shape of it doesn't naturally fit your foot well, you're definitely going to notice it. And Caswell did that, I'm assuming, to make the boots look a little bit more sleek, which it definitely has. But I think this last is also the reason why Caswell has put out different lasts for other models of boots to provide a better fit for men with wider feet. This is not a difficult last for me, and I've had lasts before that I've had much more trouble with than this one. And I think this last will work for a lot of people. How would I rate this boot in comparison to some other brands such as like Grantstone? I think that Caswell, for me, are a lot easier to break in than Grantstone. In terms of support and the general feel, I think they're going to be similar in the insole and the way they feel when you walk, but I'm just saying that they don't feel quite as stiff and sturdy as like a Grantstone boot does. This olive wax flesh version is definitely going to feel more like a pair of Alden boots or even Allen Edmonds. It's going to be more softer and easier on your feet to break in. How would I rate this boot overall out of 1 through 10? Well, I'm going to also compare it to the previous boot that I have in Olive Chrome Excel. Now, if you had to ask me if I had to live with one or the other, which one do I like better? Well, I like the olive wax flesh better. Number one is that it's a little more green, which is what I was looking for. Another reason is that it just happens to fit me better. It's a little more roomy at the instep. There's just more room in the shoe overall. I also like the outsole better. This Dr. Soul Super Grip is probably the best rubber sole I've ever tried. But also, I like how this leather doesn't really crease. It just sort of rolls like how Shell Cordovan does. I would give the previous version now, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. For this version, I would give it a 9 out of 10, but the Olive Chrome XL is still a very nice boot. It just depends on the taste of what you're looking for. And also, if you are interested in purchasing a pair of Caswell boots, I have an affiliate link below this video that if you purchase through that link, I might get a small cut of the commission from the sale. So it's totally optional, but if you do decide to purchase through the affiliate link, thank you very much. So I hope you got something useful out of this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon on the next video.